Hello, Wallace. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be on Kev-On Air. We're so honored to have you. We've heard so much about you, and one of the highlights, which I was really interested, was that you, the Heading Forward song that was performed by Andy Lau, Jackie Chung, Alan Tam at our 25th anniversary of our Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, was a very, special song and very well welcomed by many in Hong Kong and also in mainland and also by many Chinese around the world. You actually did a special edition of the song, I heard. Could you share a bit about that and what were your reflections on that?
Of course, well, first and foremost, I just want to express how grateful I am for being on this show. I'm sure this will be a fantastic opportunity, just to give my 2 cents on stuff and I'm sure that I'll bring away a lot more. So, and thank you for your question. Basically, the event I played that song in was Tsinghua University's Arts Education Center. They held a sort of special celebration for the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to the Chinese mainland. And basically they invited me to participate in the planning and the performing part of this sort of event. And yes, as you said, I did perform a sort of special version of Heading Forward where me and the pianist, we transcribed the piece to a violin and piano piece, and we performed it amongst other pieces such as My Country, My People, On the Field of Great Prospects, 狮子山下等等, pieces like that. And the reason I chose these pieces is actually because these pieces mean a lot to me as someone who is a Hong Kong Chinese and a violinist. And it was a poignant memory for me because, it was such a huge event, I am sure, as you know. And personally, I believe that all pieces of music have their own unique story and their own soul. For example, My Country, My People, it's about the protagonist's sort of indivisible feeling of love towards the homeland and the sort of inevitable nostalgia and yearning whenever he's in foreign land. I thought that it was meaningful to this whole event because it signifies that Hong Kong has finally returned home for 25 years. And the piece such as On the Field of Great Prospects, it's about looking forward towards a bright and hopeful future. And in the same vein, of course, Heading Forward is a piece that encourages Hong Kong teenagers to grasp the opportunity, to grow, to develop, and to collaborate together to ensure that Hong Kong has a bright and prosperous and peaceful future. Of course, and as someone from this very dynamic city, I hold this idea very close to my heart. And as we all know, Hong Kong has had its share of turbulence and hiccups in recent years. And I think this song is very important because it reminds us that those hiccups are nothing but small hiccups. And we should really be, looking forward, heading forward with our heads held high and sort of be proud that we're continuing the tradition of 5,000 years of history, of rich history and culture. And so, as I've been saying, playing those pieces was such a memorable event for me.
Wow, thank you. Your optimism and perseverance transpires as you speak. So, as somebody who embraces our Chinese history and your identity as Chinese, you actually went to school in Hong Kong. Actually, your kindergarten was Burma Hill.
Right.
Actually, my kids went to Burma Hill as well.
Fantastic.
Great to know that they have such a distinguished senior. And then you went to a local, again, very prestigious school, DBS throughout. How did you, with such a obviously very distinguished education background through our local education system, how did you decide on when you chose where to go to university? Obviously you would have been able to choose so many different options and locations as well. How did you decide on going to Tsinghua?
It's funny. It's been my dream to go to Tsinghua, to go to Beijing since I was in senior school, in secondary school, secondary 2 or 3 perhaps. It's that, as you know, Bramer Hill, DBS, these are all, great schools, great teachers, great peers, great students, and a lot of encouragement from them. But it's very, Western-centered education. So in class, basically all lessons are conducted in English. Teachers talk about Western history, what's happening in the Western world. And among our peer group, we talk about, Western pop cinema or something. And so it was difficult for me to know the Chinese mainland as I should have. And it was only at home, actually, that my mother would show me all these clips and videos about what's happening in the Chinese mainland, which really piqued my interest. And I believe the foremost reason of why I wanted to go to Tsinghua University was that I wanted to connect on a deeper level and rediscover my cultural roots and my cultural heritage, which I think is especially important for young people in Hong Kong. As they say, we have to 背靠祖国，然后面向世界, right? So that's one. And when that came through, I sort of looked into deeper reasons into why I wanted to go to Tsinghua. And I would say the second reason is that Tsinghua University has the most the smartest and the most hardworking people I've known anywhere in the world. And to be able to live with them, to learn with them, to play with them, to even order fried chicken at 4 a.m. in the morning. It's such a fantastic experience because I've learned so much from them. Obviously, in classes, you learn theory, you learn decades of experience and pitfalls and how to get out of pitfalls from the professors who are very dedicated and patient. But at the same time, you're really spending much more time with your peers, your roommates, your friends. From them, I've truly learned, the meaning of being socially minded, because ever since I started talking to my friends, they've all been talking about how in the future, in 10 or 20 years, they all wish to contribute their efforts and their abilities into making the society a better place, and even better place for people to live in. And that was a revelation for me. And so I've learned a lot from them. And at the same time, I feel like I'm contributing my own unique perspectives as someone who grew up in Hong Kong. And we have all sorts of discussions and, brainstorming and stuff like that. And third and finally is that ever since my time in Hong Kong, I've always wanted to become a cultural bridgeway between Beijing and Hong Kong. And I feel like my being in Beijing, my being in Tsinghua, has allowed me to pave the way to sort of meet this goal. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so Wallace, thank you so much for sharing about how you applied to Tsinghua. Another interesting thing I was hoping to understand more of is how did you decide on studying international relations? Because obviously, I think as a topic globally, it's a lot of interest given, especially also with the China-U.S. Geopolitical tension. But as a subject to be studying, it's not a common subject for for students to choose to study. How did you decide on studying international relations?
Well, in the beginning, when we applied to Tsinghua University, we're actually assigned into different sort of departments. So I was in the School of Social Sciences, and in there were lots of interesting subjects, such as economics, psychology, international relations, sociology. So in the beginning, I really didn't think much about doing international relations because there was just so much to experiment on. I did my fair share of economics, psychology, blah, blah, blah. But there was this one course, I think it was a beginner course on international relations, and I went there, and the professor just really, really captivated me with the way he was speaking, the way he was analyzing, global events. At the end of the day, international relations is a study on war, or rather how to prevent war. So that really resonated with me because, I love Chinese culture. I love music, and both of these things are actually point towards harmony and collaboration. So, for me, the study of war and the study of peace was quite. It was just a choice for me because I've always wanted to promote sort of understanding, harmony, peace. And I feel like international relations really encapsulates all of these.
And as somebody who's now in his fourth year at Tsinghua, I'd love to learn, how does the school life compare between Tsinghua in Beijing and also, Hong Kong school life? Like, what are some of the differences? Were there adjustment issues, or were there things you had to readjust? And also, you had 2 years of your school life during COVID, which I'm sure was also another big adjustment.
Right.
Could you share a bit about that?
Well, of course, there were a lot of adjustments. To begin with, I'm an only child, so I've never really had the opportunity to live with people, much less 4 people in a room. Second of all, Beijing is, as we all know, it's either extremely cold or extremely hot. And most of the time it's very dry, which is in stark contrast to Hong Kong's very humid weather. And obviously language, I feel like, whether spoken or written, was, there needs to be adjustments. And the fourth one, which is quite personal to me as a musician, is that back in Hong Kong, back at home in secondary school, my mom would describe me as 琴不離手. But it's not very easy to do that in the dormitories because it would be selfish to play the violin whenever you want. Maybe your roommates or your neighbors would want to rest, sleep, or they just want to be in a quiet place, right? So, okay, let's elaborate on the first one, which was living with roommates. It's funny because I never thought I would adapt that quickly. Living with them was such a fun experience that whenever we think of how we're in our last year, the 4 of us want to, give each other a hug and cry about it. Because we've had so much wonderful memories. As I've just said, ordering fried chicken at 4 a.m. for an entire semester. It was such an experience. And a huge shout out to my roommates. I miss you guys. And, they actually helped me adapt a lot to school. They taught me a lot of, Chinese slang, and then they really guided me along the entire way of college. Second of all, the climate. I actually prefer a drier climate. It's much more comfortable. Sometimes when you wake up in Hong Kong, you feel like you're swimming. But in Beijing, it's okay. And I don't really mind the stark contrast, really. It's, how do I put it? 四季分明. And I like how I can, look at the trees. The leaves are orange and I know it's autumn. Or when there's snow, it's snowing. I know it's winter. It's wonderful. And the language thing, the third thing, the language thing was not as bad as I expected. Because, fun fact, the first language I ever learned was Chinese Mandarin. I was born in Hong Kong to Hong Kong parents, to Hong Kong Chinese parents. But, they just wanted to teach me Chinese Mandarin. And it was not until I was in nursery school that they realized I wasn't making any friends because no one could understand what I was talking about. So then I learned Cantonese and English. But so, after 10 years of relative obscurity in the Mandarin department, I found it was quite easy to pick up in Beijing. And I'm also proud to say that I've picked up a bit of a Beijing accent when I'm in the zone. Sometimes it comes pretty naturally to me, which is in stark contrast to what we would have in DBS, because obviously everything we do in there is English this, English that, English. But I like the contrast. I like how I'm speaking more Chinese and I'm actively participating in the improving of my Chinese abilities. And as to the fourth one, well, violin. I do realize that sometimes in different stages of life, you have to do different things. So perhaps in secondary school, I was doing a lot of performing, a lot of playing, the classical Western canon. But in college, I've really been doing a lot of discovery. I've been discovering a lot of Chinese classical composers, such as Guanxia or Chen Gang. The people who wrote the Butterfly Lovers and all these other amazing pieces. I've been doing a lot of discovery, and I've also been doing a lot of organizing work, backstage, not necessarily in front of the stage.
Right. Wow. Most recently, you mentioned about your passion for music. Right. I know you were able to actually have an opportunity to host a music camp in Tsinghua. Could you share a bit about this camp and the objectives
of course,
how it was?
Well, the main objective of the camp was to bring together a group of teenagers with a shared love of music to come on this platform and communicate with each other. There's honest, open dialogue. And at the end of the day, you're making friends with people that you might not necessarily have the opportunity to meet. So it was actually the first project of my startup company called Xinqing Zhiyou. And I think it's quite obvious that the goal of the company is to let people make friends. And I believe that the camp was an excellent opportunity because, as you all know, music is a wonderful vehicle that transcends barriers, it transcends, culture. And it's a collaborative process in which people can get to know each other. In this camp, we invited 20 students from Hong Kong and Beijing. Students from Hong Kong came from DGS, St. Paul's Co-Educational College. And in Beijing, the students came from 人大附中分校 and Beijing 八十中. And they were all string players. So they would come to this camp, this 5-day camp in Tsinghua University, and they would live together, they would play together, rehearse together. And so it was a wonderful experience for them as well. At the end, this Beijing student was learning Cantonese from one of the Hong Kong students. And one of the Hong Kong students told me a funny story. It's like, in Beijing, all their Mandarin is 卷舌, 卷舌, 卷舌. I really got to, practice this and show this to my friends in Hong Kong. So I thought it was a wonderful opportunity, and it was quite a success, actually. And it's just one of the many projects that I'm working on right now, our company. Yes.
Wow, that's so exciting. I still remember actually in 2002, I had an opportunity through China's Synergy program where they gathered actually 80 youth from around the world, different universities from US, Cornell, Cambridge, Harvard, Hong Kong. We had Hong Kong U and different universities in Macau, and then Beidai, Tsinghua. And I think, to your point is, I think, what you're doing is so important because I think having that time where it's more in depth and people are able to live together, just having normal conversations, of course, visiting and touring and understanding, the new initiatives of different regions, it's very key. I think at the end of the day, it's the relationships built.
Of course.
And, to this day, actually, one of my very good friends who was actually one of my groomsmen at my wedding was from Tsinghua.
Oh.
So, we've kept in touch all these years. And I think, understanding and building those relationships, it's so key.
Of course,
so
of course.
We look forward to hearing more about your initiatives and
Thank you
company
so much.
as you move forward.
Well, it's the thing is, I feel like mainland teenagers and Hong Kong teenagers aren't really talking at all. They're not communicating. There's this sort of silence there. Where no one really knows what the other person is doing. And I think music really has the ability to break that silence. In the camp, we actually invited Liu Siqing, which is a famous Chinese violinist, to become our artistic director. And he also gave master classes to these students. And in the end, he also performed with them in a lot of solo pieces, Vivaldi and Butterfly Lovers. And we also invited Yu Hai Lao Shi, who was the conductor of the PLA marching band. So basically, he's conducted the national anthem thousands of times. And he is the most qualified teacher to talk about the national anthem. And so we arranged that. So it's not just about improving their musical abilities. It's more about nurturing their sort of communication and relationships, just as you said, with each other. So they, no other on a deeper level, have more open dialogue and exchanges. And two, it's also, I think, a great opportunity to learn more about the Chinese mainland.
So Wallace, you study international relations in a time where geopolitical tension is at an all-time high in some sense in the region, and also with our two superpowers, the China and the US. What are your views of international relations currently?
Well, as a student of international relations, it's quite clear to us that a constant state of the world is that it's never peaceful. It can approach peace, but at the end of the day, there's always conflict, and it's unavoidable. There's a theory in international relations called offensive realism, which basically says that for a state to survive, because survival, security, is a state's highest priority to survive. And in order to survive, a state must become the most powerful state to preserve its sort of safety. Because when you're the largest state, no one can defeat you, and therefore you'll always be safe. But perhaps, maybe it's time to rethink that. In such a conflict-ridden world, I think the Chinese government has said that we have to be aware that we're all 人类命运共同体. We're all one, we're all one big family, essentially, in the whole world. And as you know, harmony is something that is deeply ingrained into our heritage and our society. So I think that I truly wish to promote and hope that in the future we can all envision a place where we're all, harmonious, we're all understanding, and keep conflicts to a minimum. But how we get this message across to people who, detractors and people who doubt its veracity, is that as young people in China, we have a responsibility to tell a good story about China. And as people in Hong Kong, we have this, I wouldn't say unique strength, but we have a sort of advantage because a lot of schools are, primarily English taught, that we can use a sort of language that the whole world understands to promote the message of peace and harmony, which is central to the Chinese being. And, it's and for myself, in Beijing, I've participated in quite a few sort of shows where Chinese teenagers get together with Korean teenagers, American teenagers, and we talk about, world politics. We talk about what we think about what's going on in the world. And it's wonderful because we get to have, open and honest exchange, cultural exchange happening. So I've always found that quite fascinating. And more personal to me, of course, is that because, I played the violin and I'm always thinking of how music can tie into everything. To tell a good story about China, you have to have a comprehensive and compelling story. And culture and music is always a very, integral, pivotal part to, understanding anything. And there are a lot of wonderful, wonderful Chinese composers who write pieces which are extremely, easily accepted by those who may be more used to Western music. And I think that on a cultural exchange level, we can really be playing these Chinese pieces on Western instruments such as the violoncello, piano, to reach an even wider audience. This idea sort of came to me when I played in collaboration with Lang Lang. I think it was 3 years ago. We played My Country, My People to an audience in Tsinghua University, and it was also live streamed worldwide. So it really showed me how music transcends barriers, and it can bring the knowledge and understanding of more Chinese culture to a global audience. So that was quite eye-opening to me. And personally, on a personal scale, I feel like my time in Beijing has been really fulfilling and enriching. And I feel like I've grown a lot, matured a lot, and I've seen a lot more things. For me, Beijing is abound in opportunities. And I really wish to sort of share my own perspectives. I wish that other Chinese teenagers, other teenagers from Hong Kong as well, can have the same experience and see Beijing through my eyes. And if we go back to the music camp, perhaps, I'm also planning in future installments to bring all of the students to multiple stops in mainland China and also a stop in Hong Kong. So I hope that this will give them, more opportunities to know each other on a deeper level.
Thank you so much, Wallace, for your time today and for sharing, your unique background of your upbringing and your passion and love for Beijing and Tsinghua, and also music. It's very enlightening to also hear how you see arts and culture as something that transcends barriers and to unite people and to bring peace. So thank you so much, Wallace.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.